Hey everyone, welcome back. We're doing a deep dive today into something really, really disturbing.
Yeah.
Um, the alleged crimes at Zanzou nightclub in Pretoria.
Right.
The ones that have had those videos going viral.
Mm-hmm.
It's tough to even imagine being in that situation. So let's try to piece together
Right.
what happened, who's involved,
Yeah.
and what this whole thing means for safety and accountability.
Absolutely.
So picture this. You're out with friends,
Yeah.
the music's pumping, everyone's
Yeah.
having a good time. You chose Zanzou.
Right.
It's popular, it seems safe.
Yeah.
But then instead of a night of fun, things take a very dark turn.
Yeah.
We're talking about reports of assault, sexual assault,
Mm-hmm.
even torture, allegedly, at the hands of the club's own security.
It's really tough stuff, and the details that have emerged are particularly disturbing.
Yeah.
The allegations include forced rape and victims being forced to do incredibly humiliating things,
Oh, wow.
like inserting objects into their own
Oh,
bodies.
my gosh.
It seems some of this was even caught on video.
Really?
It's a horrifying violation of basic human dignity,
Yeah.
the kind of thing that strikes at the core of what we consider to be fundamental human
So
rights.
right off the bat, we're not talking about,
Yeah,
a simple bar fight or anything like that.
absolutely not. This is way beyond that.
Yeah.
In South Africa, you have your constitution,
Right.
and it clearly lays out these rights. Section 10, for example, is all about the right to dignity. Into
Okay.
Section 12, freedom from all forms of violence.
Right.
This case, if the allegations are true, throws those rights out the window.
And people are understandably outraged.
Oh, absolutely.
There's been a huge public outcry with calls for Zanzou to be shut down coming from all sides,
Yeah.
student groups, community organizations, even government departments.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's demanding action.
And what's interesting is it's not just about the severity of the alleged crimes themselves,
Yeah.
it's also about the context in which they occurred.
Right?
Nightclubs especially have a responsibility to ensure the safety of their patrons.
Yeah.
People go there to relax, have fun, let loose.
Right.
When that sense of security is shattered, it raises serious questions about how we regulate these spaces and what more can be done to protect people.
Yeah, you're putting a lot of trust in a business when you walk through those doors.
Yeah.
You're trusting them to,
To have your back.
yeah, to have your back, keep things under control.
Yeah, and in this case, several organizations are questioning whether Zanzou lived up to that responsibility.
I see.
Groups like the MK Party Student Movement in Senko,
Okay.
the South African National Civics Organization have been very vocal.
Right.
They're saying this isn't just about a few bad apples.
Yeah.
It's about a systemic failure to prioritize safety.
And it's not just the usual activist groups. We're also seeing government bodies stepping in.
Yeah.
The City of Schwayne, the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development, even the Human Rights Commission.
Yeah, it seems like everyone is saying enough is enough.
Wow. So,
And that level of response really underscores the gravity of the situation.
yeah.
The Department of Justice, for example,
Okay.
went so far as to call for the immediate closure of Zanzou,
Wow.
labeling the incident an affront to the fundamental rights enshrined in our Constitution.
Right.
They're making it clear that this isn't just a local issue.
Mm-hmm.
It's a national concern that goes to the heart of their commitment to human rights.
Wow. Strong word. So where do things stand now, legally speaking? Are there actual investigations underway?
Oh, absolutely. Multiple investigations, in fact.
Really?
The police are leading the criminal investigation,
Okay.
focusing on those specific acts of violence and sexual assault. They've got their family violence, child protection, and sexual investigations unit on the case.
Okay.
They're the ones who handle these really sensitive and complex crimes.
Makes sense. You need specialists for something this heavy.
Right, and on top of that, they've launched a manhunt for 8 foreign nationals
Oh, wow.
who are believed to be the former bouncers involved.
Okay.
They're also trying to locate 2 more potential victims,
I see.
because so far only 3 have come forward to file charges.
Wow.
It's a huge undertaking, but they're pulling out all the stops.
What about Zanzou itself? Surely they're not just sitting back and watching all this unfold.
Well, they did release a statement.
Okay.
They're claiming they fired the security company they were using
Right.
after discovering what they call these practices.
Hold on. They discovered these practices.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder what kind of vetting process they had in place for their security in the first place.
Exactly. And that's a key point that a lot of people are bringing up.
Yeah.
Simply saying, oh, it was the security company, not us.
Right.
Doesn't really cut it. You've got organizations like the African Transformation Movement, ATM,
Okay.
calling them out on that.
Right.
They're arguing that Zanzou can't just outsource their responsibility
Right.
for what happens on their property. It's like saying you're not responsible for your dog biting someone
Yeah.
because you hired a dog walker. police investigation and the public outcry.
Yeah.
You also have the South African Human Rights Commission launching their own investigation.
Okay, so now we've got 3 separate investigations running concurrently.
That's right.
What's the Human Rights Commission focusing on?
Their angle is really interesting. They're not just looking at what happened during the incident itself.
Right.
They're looking at what Zanzou did after they became aware of these videos.
I see.
They want to know why the nightclub didn't immediately report the incident to the police.
Now that you mention it, that is strange. Why wouldn't they report it right away?
Right. It raises some serious concerns about their priorities. Were
Yeah.
they more concerned about protecting their reputation
Right.
than about the well-being of the victims?
Yep.
Were they trying to sweep things under the rug?
Right.
The Human Rights Commission wants to get to the bottom of that.
So this isn't just about the bouncers and the alleged assaults anymore.
Right.
We're now talking about potential negligence on the part of Zanzou's management.
Exactly, and this is where the concept of negligence comes in.
Okay.
Think of it this way. If you own a swimming pool,
Yeah.
you have a responsibility to make sure it's safe.
Right.
You need a fence, maybe a safety cover.
Mhm.
If someone gets hurt because you didn't take those precautions,
Right.
you could be considered negligent.
Right.
You didn't take the necessary steps to prevent harm, even though you had a responsibility to do so.
So applying that to Zanzou,
Yes.
the Human Rights Commission is trying to figure out if they fail to take reasonable steps to protect their patrons,
Exactly.
and then whether they tried to cover it up afterward.
You got it. And this is where things start to get really interesting from a legal and ethical standpoint.
Okay.
We'll unpack all of that in more detail as we continue our deep dive.
It's wild to think that something as simple as going out for a night of fun could turn into such a nightmare. But as we're seeing, the situation is way more complicated than just a few bad actors. We're talking about potential systemic failures, legal and ethical questions about responsibility, and a whole lot of unanswered questions.
Right, and let's not forget about the victims.
Yeah.
They're the ones at the heart of this, and their experiences need to be front and center. Imagine the trauma of going through something like that, then having to relive it all as the story explodes in the media.
It's heartbreaking, and it raises questions about what kind of support is available to them, not just in terms of legal recourse, but also, emotional and psychological support.
That's a crucial point. The African Transformation Movement, in their statement, wasn't just calling for Zanzou to be shut down. They were also demanding financial compensation for the victims.
Right.
It makes you think about what real justice looks like in a situation like this. Is it enough to just punish the perpetrators? Or does it also require acknowledging the harm done and taking concrete steps to help the victims heal?
Yeah, money can't erase what happened, but it could at least help them access therapy, legal representation, whatever they need to start putting their lives back together.
Exactly. And it also sends a message that their suffering is being taken seriously.
So we've got the police looking into the specific crimes, the Human Rights Commission digging into Zanzou's actions afterward, and the public demanding justice for the victims. What does all of this mean for the nightlife industry as a whole? Does this case have the potential to change things?
It absolutely has the potential to be a turning point. Think about it. This isn't the first time we've heard stories of violence or assault happening at nightclubs.
Right.
But the severity of the allegations in this case, combined with the viral nature of those videos, has really captured public attention in a way we haven't seen before.
Yeah.
It's forced us to confront some uncomfortable truths about the risks that exist in these spaces and the responsibility that businesses have to protect their patrons.
I feel like there's a sense that things can't just go back to normal after this.
Right, and I think that's where the real opportunity for change lies.
Yeah.
This case has sparked a conversation that's long overdue.
Mm-hmm.
People are starting to ask what measures can be taken to prevent something like this from happening again. What role do we as individuals play in demanding accountability and creating safer spaces?
It's not enough to just point fingers at Zanzou and say, they messed up. We need to look at the bigger picture.
Right.
What kind of regulations do we need in place? How can we improve security protocols? What can each of us do to make sure we're not contributing to a culture where this kind of behavior is tolerated?
It's about shifting the mindset from that's just how things are to this isn't acceptable and we need to do something about it.
Okay, so let's get practical. What are some concrete steps that could be taken?
Well, for starters, stricter regulations for security personnel at nightclubs would be a good place to start. Mandatory background checks, training on de-escalation techniques, and clear guidelines for the use of force.
Yeah.
Those are all things that could make a difference.
That makes sense. If you're hiring someone to be responsible for the safety of, hundreds of people, You want to make sure they're actually qualified for the job, right?
Exactly. And it's not just about the individual bouncers, it's about the culture within these security companies. Are they fostering a sense of respect for patrons, or are they encouraging an attitude of aggression and intimidation? That's something that needs to be addressed at a company-wide level.
And what about the nightclubs themselves? What can they do beyond just hiring a security company and hoping for the best?
They need to take an active role in creating a safe environment.
Okay.
This means having clear policies against harassment and discrimination, training their staff to recognize and respond to potential problems, and creating a culture where patrons feel comfortable reporting incidents without fear of retaliation.
It's like you don't just want to react to problems after they happen. You want to create an atmosphere where problems are less likely to occur in the first place.
Exactly. It's about prevention, not just reaction. And it requires a commitment from everyone involved, the owners, the managers, the staff, and even the patrons. We all have a role to play in creating a safer and more respectful environment.
Speaking of patrons, I think it's important to acknowledge that bystander intervention can play a huge role in these situations. If you see something happening that doesn't seem right, don't just look away.
Yeah.
Say something, intervene if it's safe to do so, or alert a staff member. Sometimes just the presence of another person who's paying attention can be enough to deter someone from acting out.
That's so true. We can't rely solely on security personnel or management to solve this problem. It's a collective responsibility. We all need to be aware of our surroundings, look out for each other, and create a culture where this kind of behavior is simply not tolerated.
It sounds like this Zanzou incident could be a real catalyst for positive change, but only if we all commit to doing our part.
I agree. It's a painful reminder of how quickly things can go wrong, but it's also an opportunity to learn, grow, and create a better future for everyone. So let's delve a bit deeper into those legal nuances you mentioned earlier, because understanding the legal framework is a big part of ensuring accountability.
All right, so let's talk about the legal side of things.
Okay,
You mentioned negligence earlier,
right.
and how the Human Rights Commission is looking into Zanzou's actions after the fact.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of legal trouble could they be facing if they're found to have been negligent?
Well, in South Africa, negligence is a pretty big deal. It means you had a duty of care to someone you breached that duty, and as a result, they suffered harm.
Right,
In this case, Zanzou had a duty to provide a safe environment for its patrons.
right,
If they knew about these alleged assaults and did nothing,
yeah.
or if they didn't take reasonable steps to prevent them, they could be considered negligent.
So it's not just about being aware of a problem.
Right.
It's about taking action to fix it.
Exactly. And the consequences can be serious.
Okay,
We're not just talking about bad press or a slap on the wrist.
right.
We're talking about potential fines, lawsuits, even criminal charges in some cases.
Wow, that's pretty intense.
Yeah,
So even if Zanzou wasn't directly involved in the assaults,
right.
they could still be held responsible for what happened on their property.
That's right. It all comes down to that duty of care.
Okay,
Think about it this way. If you own a store and someone slips and falls on a wet floor because you didn't put up a warning sign, you could be liable. You had a duty to keep your premises safe for customers. The same principle applies here.
it makes you wonder how many other businesses out there might be cutting corners or turning a blind eye to potential dangers. I mean, we're focusing on Zanzou here, but this could happen anywhere.
It's a valid concern, and it's why this case is so important. It's shining a light on the need for greater accountability, not just in the nightlife industry, but across the board. Businesses need to understand that they can't just pass the buck or claim ignorance when things go wrong. They have a legal and ethical obligation to protect the people who walk through their doors.
And what about the security company itself? What kind of liability do they face?
Oh, they're definitely in hot water, too.
Yeah,
We're talking about potential criminal charges for the individual bouncers involved,
yeah.
ranging from assault to sexual assault to possibly even more serious charges like kidnapping or torture.
I'm assuming the company as a whole could face legal consequences as well, right?
Absolutely, they could be sued for negligence, just like Zanzou. And depending on the specific circumstances, they could also face fines or other penalties for failing to properly train or supervise their employees.
And this whole thing is such a mess. It's hard to believe that something like this could happen in this day and age.
I know it's truly disturbing, but here's the thing. As awful as the situation is, it's also an opportunity to learn and grow. It's a chance to examine our systems, our laws, and our own behaviors, and ask ourselves what we can do to prevent something like this from happening again.
So what would you say is the biggest takeaway for our listeners? What do you want them to walk away thinking about?
I think the key takeaway is this. We all have a responsibility to speak up against injustice and to hold each other accountable. Whether you're a business owner, a security guard, a patron, or just a bystander, you have a role to play in creating a safer and more just society. Don't be afraid to speak out, to demand better, to challenge the status quo. We can't just sit back and wait for someone else to fix this. It's up to all of us.
Powerful stuff. This has been a tough deep dive,
Yeah,
but an incredibly important one. Thanks for helping us unpack all of this.
it was my pleasure. And remember, even though this situation is scary and disheartening, there is hope. We can learn from this, we can grow from this, and we can create a better future together.
Thanks for joining us today. We'll continue to follow this story as it develops. Until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and most importantly, stay safe.